We have been getting a tremendous amount of rain here, but some parts of the country not quite so lucky. This indicates the past 30 days of precipitation as a percentage of what should be normal. So parts of North Texas all the way up to Arkansas, Tennessee, Kentucky looking pretty good. Also Minnesota and South Dakota. But other parts of the country's central plains and much of the western U.S. are still below normal. And that big ridge that we have trying to set up on the west coast, not really helping much. And here we have the key to the weather patterns. We have the 250 millibar chart near the top of the troposphere. So what do we see here? Large long wave trough across the eastern U.S. and a big ridge across the western U.S. Now embedded in that ridge there is this major trough right there. That's kind of burying underneath this branch of the polar front jet up there in British Columbia, and the other branch heading down here. So it's kind of a split flow pattern. The smaller scale waves are looking like that. There's one wave right there, probably another there, and another up there in Alaska. And there's probably some ridges embedded in this flow. Now, the details in the southern latitudes, southern U.S. down here, this is actually pretty important, especially this time of year where we expect a lot of easterlies. That's not the case this time. We've got westerlies all the way down to Mexico and the Gulf and Cuba itself. We do have a little area here of easterlies in Florida, but that's about it. So the subtropical high extending into Florida and pretty much stopping there. If we went all the way down into Mexico, we could probably pick out where the highs are. In fact, why don't we take a look and go ahead and do that. Now, pivotal weather doesn't really have any good large-scale tropical sectors, and for that, what I want to do is go to tropicaltidbits.com, and you can see there's a bunch of different views that they give you. A lot of these are large-scale views, and that makes them pretty useful. So here's a good one that I would want to use to pick out the subtropical high. This has Mexico right there. There's the East Pacific. There's the Gulf. And let's go ahead and pull that upper level chart up. .200 millibar wind. Yeah, there it is. So this is showing high pressure in northwest Mexico, and only down in central Mexico do you see the easterlies all set up. So this should actually be a little bit further north than what we see right now. We're kind of in a cool pattern. And we go back to pivotal weather, which is my favorite for the temperate latitudes. So let's start out this sequence. We have a trough in the east and a ridge out west, and watch what happens over the weekend as the patterns evolve. You can see that we really build that ridge up into Alaska. That's always significant because that will help dislodge cold polar air and send it southward. And to help emphasize that, you can see that trough there in Canada. That represents a big chunk of cold air on its way south. And then as we go into next week, around Wednesday or Thursday, lots of troughing in the central U.S. and northwesterly flow. Now we have seen a discrepancy in the models. So what we're looking at here is the 500 millibar chart, and this is how it looked about 5 days ago. And I'm going to run 5 days worth of forecast runs for the European model. Now you can see these charts all have a valid time of Wednesday night next week. So running this forward, you can see that it's advertising a trough out east and a ridge out west. And then it starts building this trough, and then we get a cutoff low. This was forecast about 3 or 4 days ago. And the European model hangs on to this giant cutoff low in the Four Corners area. We advance forward, Yep. Now it's up there in Nevada. Now it's in the Four Corners area. Then it's out there. Now this is kind of significant because a pattern like this is going to cut off the cold air into the central U.S. A lot of the cold air is going to be forced into the intermountain areas right there. And since it's kind of a split flow, other parts of the cold air are going to go this way. So this is not good for cold air in the southern states there. So let's see. There's how it looked last night. Still hanging on to that cutoff low. And guess what we had for this morning? It pulled that way out to the east. Now that is going to bring cold air into the high plains and much of the central U.S. How did the GFS do? Here's how the GFS looked about 4 days ago. So it had that trough right there in the central U.S. And then we go forward model by model. It goes for a big trough in the central U.S., kind of keeps that there, backs it off a little bit. It starts heading a little bit towards the European solution, and guess what we had this morning? It just anchors that over Kansas. And if we compare the European and the GFS model, the same run for this morning, look at that. They're just about in perfect agreement. And that's a big change from yesterday or last night, when the agreement looked like that. So I think we're finally converging on a solution here. Unless things creep westward, I think we are looking for quite a bit of cold air coming south around midweek. And there are some of the forecast evening temperatures on Tuesday evening. And there they are on Wednesday evening. Yeah, that's going to break a lot of records if that happens. You know, there's still a lot that can happen between now and then. The devil is in the details, of course, so we'll just have to see how that all pans out. But I'm hoping we have something interesting to look at, and I know a lot of you will probably be excited to see something like this happen. So there's the run on Tuesday night. This is an interesting effect in the precipitation field. Looks like gravity waves developing in that flow, and then we get a big 1030 millibar high building into the central plains, and we'll see what happens after that. Anyway, we'll check it out next Monday and see where we're at. Here's the current surface map in the southeastern U.S. Kind of a weak front extending through Tennessee, Virginia, all the way down to Texas. The tail end looks like it is starting to fall apart. Temperature contrasts in that area, not very much. I mean, we go from upper 80s to pretty much the same, just a little bit drier maybe, and with a bit of northeasterly flow. So that boundary there is probably just about done. We do have the MCS across East Texas, a lot of cold pools, uncapped air mass, lots of humidity, lots of moisture and heating, helping to keep regenerating storms in that area. And then further out east, things are a little bit quieter there in Georgia and Alabama, but very hot. Some mid and upper 70, or should say mid and upper 90s through that area, and maybe some indication of kind of a weak heat trough in southern Georgia and the southern Carolinas. But up to the north, here comes some more high pressure, 1022 millibar high there with upper 70s and lower 80s, gradually filtering southward. The satellite loop pretty much reflecting that boundary. You can certainly see the difference in the air mass. Fair weather cumulus south of that, and pretty much nothing at all north of that except for some cirrus. So that runs from about D.C. down to Jackson, Kentucky, down to Memphis. Yeah, for the most part that looks good. I would probably maybe bring that front a little bit further north. But there you go. There's some consistency between the surface map and the satellite. There's the map in the northeastern U.S. Pretty quiet day, very mild, and much drier air coming southward. There's been a whole lot of cold air advection over the past week through that area, and I think that's starting to have an effect on the surface temperatures, the ground soil temperatures, which means that's going to have an effect on air mass modification. As we get more of that cold air coming down, we can pretty much keep chilling the air and adding less and less heat back to it. So that may be part of this big transition that we're seeing. A couple of cold air advection troughs coming across the Great Lakes, and just very mild 80s way out on the plains and 70s elsewhere. And there's that satellite loop. Just massive cold air advection across eastern Canada, down into New York and Vermont and Michigan. And there's a better look at it up in Quebec and Newfoundland. Looks like the cold front extends probably up into this area right here. Some pretty good showers moving into western Newfoundland. And then back here we see the main occlusion with the occluded front kind of wrapped around the north side. Pretty nice day in the Pacific Northwest. It's so devoid of clouds that the main thing that I'm seeing here is smoke. A few spots showing up there around east of Billings. And that's about it. The surface map, not a whole lot going on, but we are seeing the establishment of a lee-side trough there in Alberta. Also starting to see a heat low forming in the deserts of Washington and Oregon as the temperatures come up into the 90s. So that polar air mass that we had across the Pacific Northwest, that's definitely modified quite a bit. And with the strong heating working on the air mass there, the dry conditions, that's bringing the temperatures up. And that brings us around to the southwestern U.S. Heat low established around Yuma, Lake Havasu City, and the temperatures are coming up quite a bit. 108 there at Phoenix at this hour, 107 at Tucson, that's pretty hot for sure, and 104 at Las Vegas. And that could get worse over the next few days as that big upper-level ridge builds in. The San Joaquin Valley, also 90s in that area, 92 at Red Bluff, 91 at Bakersfield. And starting to see some hazy conditions in that valley area. Pretty devoid of clouds and just a little bit of cumulus on the higher mountains of Arizona. Out there around Safford and the Mogollon Rim, Douglas. This is a pattern kind of reminiscent of late June. And just to kind of show you some of the warming that's expected out west, these are the Gfs Forecast Highs. Now you should take this with a grain of salt. We have noticed that the GFS does tend to over-forecast temperatures in that part of the country in this kind of pattern. But it's still interesting to look at. There's the forecast highs for tomorrow. See, they got 116, 115 around Bakersfield, 106 at Vegas, and then 109 in Phoenix. For Sunday, even hotter. It's bringing in 118s all up and down the valley. Again, this is going to be, got to take that with a grain of salt. This is probably going to be more like 105 to 107, but that's still definitely up there. And then for Tuesday or Monday, yeah, pretty similar. And you see how that story goes. Now the GFS is bringing in cold air. I don't know if you saw that, but up here to the north, let me switch this over and show you temperature anomaly. Okay, so we're back again to Saturday. There's Sunday. And then there's Monday and Tuesday. And you can see there Tuesday morning, here comes that cold front coming in from the north. And we can kind of see that moving into the Las Vegas area, later on Tuesday, temperatures 20 degrees Fahrenheit below normal in Utah. And the impacts are mostly in the Southwest deserts. It doesn't cross the Sierra Nevadas. Kind of stays right up against them there. And most of the impacts heading into the Great Plains. But man, I tell you, around Albuquerque, 25 degrees below normal. And based on what I saw of the European model and this, there was that kind of bias to the west. I think the Four Corners, Albuquerque, the Rocky Mountain areas, those should have a very good chance of being below normal late next week. And then, of course, things modify, and that's it for that cold air. And there's the same maps for the central U.S. You can see that cold air. Again, this is temperature anomaly. This is Tuesday morning, Tuesday evening, up to 45 degrees, almost 50 degrees below normal. We'll see how this works itself out, but man, it's really interesting to look at on the model products. And then it's pretty much modified out by Monday, a week from now. All right, so interesting stuff to look forward to. We'll catch you again on Monday for the supporters and Tuesday for everyone else. In the meantime, have a great evening. Take care, and we will see you next week. Bye-bye.